It's a remarkable story. Return home to the place you'd never been. 안녕하세요. Hello, everyone. This is Mark Peters from the Frog outside the Well Research Center again. And today I have my old friend Paul that you've met before. Paul was the anthropologist who went back to his village, or went to a village and studied 48 years ago. How are you doing, Paul?
I'm doing well.
Charisayo. Okay, and Paul, why don't you introduce who our other guest is?
Well, this is a very special person who is my daughter, Margaret Moore now.
Well, let's look at this picture here. Here's a photograph of the women in your life, Paul. There's your wife and your mother and little Elizabeth standing there, and little David is in your mother's arms, Paul.
Yep.
And where's Margaret? Margaret, where are you in this picture?
I am in my mother's belly. That's me in Korea.
Your mommy's tummy. As you can see there, she's got a nice baby bump, and Margaret's number 3. And let's show this other picture here. This is the house. Here, Margaret, you're standing in front of the house where your mom and dad were living, where you were conceived in Korea.
That's
and
right.
You lived your first 8 months, 8.5, wasn't it?
Close, yeah.
In vitro. As I remember the story, Paul, you had to fudge a little on the airlines.
Yeah, we fudged a little on the dates so that we could get on the airplane because they had rules about how close before delivery you could go. So
Because with the change of air pressure, women give birth on airplanes.
I've heard that's what they said. So nothing happened. We made it home. It was fine.
Yes.
So
When I was growing up, I believed that my parents did that so that I could become the president of the United States.
oh, born in the USA. There you go.
That's right. Yeah, we had to get home for Margaret to be born here. That was the thing.
Okay, so Margaret, you didn't live in Korea like your big brother and big sister did. Here's a cute picture of little Elizabeth and little David in their hanbok. You grew up with this imagery of Korea all around you. What was that like for you, Margaret?
Yeah, well, I grew up with my older brother and sister, and there was a photo album in our family of a bunch of black and white photos of my family living in this village in Korea. And you know, it looked like fun, and they were playing with rabbits and playing with their friends, and people were wearing hanbok, and I felt like I had missed out. I was missing. I wasn't there, and this had been kind of a formative family experience. And I felt I was the youngest, and I felt left out. And I used to tell people that the only thing I got to see in Korea was chewed up food and blood, which was my preschooler's way of, you know, saying, gee, I was just in my mom's tummy and I didn't get to go out there and play in the village with my brother and sister.
Oh, you grew up a little bit jealous of that experience. So this idea of Korea was part of you growing up. And here we've got a picture of you wearing, is that the same hanbok that Elizabeth had on?
Yes, yeah. So I'm the younger sister, so I got a hand-me-down, of course, and I'm about 3 in that picture and loved wearing that hanbok. I had little shoes with the kind of rainbow color stripe on them as well that went with it, and it made me feel like a Korean princess, and I loved doing that.
Oh, nothing like dressing up, putting on a hanbok. You're the prettiest girl in the whole wide world when you do
Yep.
that.
For
So
sure.
what else was there about growing up in a, can we say a Korean, it wasn't a Korean house, but it was a Korean-ish
Influence. Yeah.
I mean, look at your dad right there. Behind him, there's a Korean screen. Did
Yeah.
you grow up with that screen in your vision all the time?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we grew up in the US, and I was young in the 70s and early 80s. And, you know, our house was full of objects from Korea. We had this screen, we had brass bowls. We had the Korean chests, more calligraphy, paintings, and, we ate our breakfast cereal out of silver metal rice bowls from Korea. And we were all adept at using chopsticks at a young age. And that doesn't seem very remarkable now in 2022. The US has become a much more, and the world has become a more globally connected place. But back then that was unusual to have that exposure to Asian culture at home. And when we had our birthday dinner and got to choose what we wanted for dinner, more often than not, we would choose to have a Korean feast, and my parents would make bulgogi, and we'd have lettuce wraps and all the side dishes. And so it was just a big part of growing up. And when we did interact with the Korean community in the Boston area, which is where I grew up, people were always surprised that my dad, this American, could speak Korean quite well. And then the kind of showpiece that we had was the three of us little kids would sing Santoki to these adults, and they would just roll with laughter because here are these three little American kids singing about the bunny rabbit in Korean.
So you got in on all of that part of it.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Well, here you grew up with a father that is deeply invested in Korea, and with the Korean food and Korean habits in your household. You must have really been excited to go to Korea.
Yeah.
And that was when? 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago in 2020. So in the meantime, my dad and I became business partners 6 years ago, and we do corporate leadership training, and had a client who said, oh, we want to send you to Korea to do a training there. And that was really exciting. I think probably I had always wanted to go and just didn't know how that was ever going to happen. And now we had this opportunity to go together and to do some work, which is my favorite way to travel. I love to, it's great being a tourist and seeing palaces and sites and museums, but it's even better to have a real reason to be there that's part of your real life. And that's why I like working abroad. So this was very exciting. We went a week early so that we could spend some time before we moved to the conference center and started just working every day.
So you went down to the village, and here again is this picture of you in front of the home where your mom and dad, brother and sister were living. Paul, this house, it's not a normal house.
No, it was called Chonghwaegat, and it's a meeting house for the family association.
And they gave that up to you for a year.
Yeah.
And they put a kitchen, a temporary kitchen on the back so you could cook.
Yep.
And this is where Margaret was not hatched, but conceived.
Began. Yeah.
I've got this picture here, Margaret, of a bunch of older ladies, and one of them is hugging you.
Yeah.
What's that about?
So we took the train down to the village. We stayed in this cute bed and breakfast that was traditional, Hanok style houses that was up on the hill above from the village. And people knew we were coming through the miracle of email, and we were walking down the streets of the village, and it was this strange experience because it was so familiar. I had never been there before, but I had studied these pictures as a kid, and I felt like I knew where I was. And as we were walking down the road in the village, this woman saw us and threw her arms out and ran to greet us. She was so excited. And that's the woman who's hugging me. And she was our next door neighbor. And she's the mother of my older sister's best friend, her kind of buddy who she palled around with and played with every day.
Wow. And she just took you right in.
Yeah, she made a wonderful breakfast for us on our last day there, a wonderful meal, and was enthusiastic and happy and very loving of me just from the get-go. She's a very direct woman, and she did say to me, "You should have brought your sister." And I definitely got the sense that she would have been even more excited if it had been my older sister who had showed up at the village.
But in spite of that, she was thoroughly welcoming to you.
Yeah.
And the other women in the village, they're all 60, 70 years old, which means 50 years ago, these were young brides.
They're 80, I think. Some of them. They were older than me, and they're amazing. One of the things when Nancy went with me in 2015, she was amazed that these older ladies sit up without any visible means of getting up from the floor where they sit all day. She said she was totally blown away with this, how limber they were and at ease they were in this situation. They congregate pretty much every day in this little house that the people in the village built for the older folks, but most of them are women, and they're there every day, and they have a kind of party all the time. And Margaret was welcome to the party as a native daughter, really. And you see, they're having a blast. She's cute. Look, they all look really happy to see her.
Oh, that's really fun. I've shown several pictures here of your trip, Margaret. It occurs to me that this fits what John Denver, of all people, said in one of his songs in Rocky Mountain High. The first line says, someone returned to a home where he'd never been before. And I think that captures your situation. You returned to a place that was home that you'd never been before. Interesting, huh?
Felt like my family's place, and I was welcomed as someone who belonged there, and I definitely belonged there. Yeah. And I felt that, and it was wonderful. It exceeded, my expectations. It was a great visit.
And you made your brother and sister jealous?
Yeah, well, that was one thing. A lot of people asked how they were doing. Everyone wanted to know, and certainly they would have loved to have them there. And it's kind of ironic because I spent my whole childhood being jealous of them because they got to go. And yet, 40 years later, there I am as an adult, able to remember this experience. They were so young, they don't remember that much.
No.
And so, yeah, I think maybe they're a little jealous, and I wish they could have come too. That would have been great.
Well, next time let's I want to take my kids too, Paul. Let's go back to Korea. Hey, I want to talk about your business connection here just a little bit. In the earlier videos with Paul, we drew some parallels to what Paul had learned in the village. What has carried over from Korea to your business, if anything?
Margaret needs to talk about that. I think it'd be fun to hear what she has to say.
Yeah, Margaret, what is it that's Korean, or is it just your dad?
Well, I think, I don't know if people watched the last video or maybe the first one that he did with you, Mark, but the village where he did his work, I think he was mentored by a lot of, wise people and kind of schooled in relationships and how to treat people. And I know Paul has a natural talent, I think, that was just in him from the beginning, which is a real fascination with people. Paul knows how to ask questions and engage people and find out what's interesting about them, and then to really be delighted about it. He really loves people, and I think that's why he became an anthropologist. And he also learned from some of these, mentors. I mean, he was there as a student to write his, study and write a dissertation and bring some knowledge back to the US. But I think the learning was going both ways while he was there. And he really learned about kind of how to build good relationships of respect and mutual caring, and to make a community work. And that's certainly what our business is about how to, at work now, build relationships of caring and trust and respect, and help people to do that, because it's not something that's taught in our society. I think especially Western society, as much as it needs to be. You know, people need to know how to interact constructively so that they can while also enjoying good human relationships and interaction.
On this slide with you two leading a seminar, on the whiteboard there, you've got Chinese characters. And Paul, I've talked with you about your work before. You bring in the Tao Te Ching and Taoism and some other Asian concepts.
Yes.
Margaret, do you use those as well?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I don't write Chinese characters, and I don't speak Korean, except for, you know, little niceties, but absolutely some big Chinese texts like the Tao Te Ching and other poetry and stories are used in our course and are very powerful learning for people globally. We teach in the United States, we teach in Europe, we've taught in India and in East Asia, and these concepts are timeless and they resonate with people. And I love those teachings.
Well, you know, this is amazing. Someone just watching this video would assume that, Paul, you brought Margaret up in the business, but Margaret, you were doing your own thing for, what'd you tell me, 17 years before you and your dad said, hey, there's something we can do together here. And yeah, you had a clientele of your own. I know you've got a bachelor's degree from Oberlin and a MBA from BU,
Boston College, BC.
Boston College, okay, BC. We don't want to get those confused.
No, Eagles.
Those are cardinal sins. But I know, Margaret, for a time you were the artistic director of the Utah Symphony.
Yeah, I used to do artistic planning for the Utah Symphony. I studied music at Oberlin and decided to go into arts management. And that's what I did throughout my 20s, and decided to get an MBA so that I could go back and help arts organizations run more smoothly and efficiently. And while I was at business school, I became interested in organizational behavior and then became a consultant myself. And I guess what ended up happening is our work lives started to be a little bit parallel. You know, I found myself doing executive coaching, training, facilitation, teaching. And those were the things that Paul had been doing for many years in a corporate context. So that's how we started talking about joining forces. But no, it wasn't like I was a kid and the expectation was there's a family business and you've got to learn it and do it. That was never the plan.
You went out this way and then your trails have converged again.
Yeah.
You've got a story about that, Paul, about what Nancy said
Yeah,
about.
I think the key to that happening was when Nancy and I were talking and she said, hey, you know, you'll do this forever and people like what you do. What are you going to do? Are you just going to throw the thing away when you retire, or are you going to find somebody to take it over? And I said, well, I've thought about that and I just can't think of anybody who could do it.
There's a Korean saying, it's dark under the lamp.
Yeah, right.
You know, in other words, something right under your nose.
She's sitting right there. And so Nancy said, well, what about Margaret? And I said, oh, yeah, it was dark under the lamp till she said that.
Well, that's an amazing story.
What happened?
That's how it happened. You can thank Nancy. You can thank your mom, Margaret, for bringing your businesses together.
Yeah.
Well, that's marvelous. It's been great talking to you, and I hope our audience enjoyed and appreciated it. It's a remarkable story. Return home to the place you'd never been. Well, this has been Mark Peters from the Frog Outside the Well Research Center. We'll look forward to seeing you all next time. Bye.
Bye, everyone.